Introducing the Mise en Place Culture First podcast, where operational excellence begins and ends with you. Let's get started.
You know, you generally expect raw chicken to be dangerous.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Like when poultry comes through your back door, everyone in the kitchen implicitly understands the threat there, you know?
That you handle it carefully, you sanitize the cutting board immediately.
Exactly. And you rely on like the ultimate safety net, which is the oven or the fryer. You cook it, you kill the bacteria, and you're basically safe.
Right, the thermal kill step.
But the most dangerous thing in your kitchen today actually isn't the poultry.
Not at all.
It's the iceberg lettuce that's just sitting completely unbothered on your prep table. And right now, I mean, there is a massive real-time crisis proving exactly why.
Yeah, it's pretty staggering.
We are looking at a July 24, 2026 CDC alert regarding an explosive multi-state outbreak. And it's linked directly to iceberg lettuce from Taylor Farms to Mexico.
To give you a sense of, just the sheer scale we're dealing with right now, this single outbreak has already caused, I think, nearly 2,000 confirmed cases.
Wow, 2,000.
Yeah, and like 98 hospitalizations across 9 different states.
Yeah.
And the numbers, they're still climbing.
Yeah.
The epidemiological curve hasn't even flattened yet.
So we are right in the middle of an active event.
Right in the thick of it, yeah.
Which is exactly why we're doing this. So welcome to our deep dive today. This specific deep dive is designed to be your definitive playbook. We're calling it Crisp and Clean. The restaurant playbook for stopping Cyclospora, protecting guests, and training staff.
I like that title. It really covers it all.
Thanks. Because if you are a restaurant operator or, a food service worker, culinary director, or just someone who is intensely invested in food safety, this is for you.
Absolutely for you.
Our mission today is to really extract the absolute best, most actionable practices to stop this specific threat, protect your guests, and actively train your staff so that your kitchen doesn't become the next headline.
Because nobody wants to be the headline. And to build this playbook, we've pulled together just an incredibly robust stack of source materials today.
A massive stack.
Yeah, we are synthesizing the FDA's commodity-specific guidelines for lettuce and leafy greens.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the real-time outbreak alerts from the CDC and DC Health, the rigorous supplier verification protocols from LW.
Which are so detailed.
Oh, incredibly detailed. Plus the National Restaurant Association's recall guidelines, the World Health Organization's 5 keys to safer food, and even some internal food safety audio transcripts.
Right. But, before we dive into all those microscopic details and the heavier regulatory frameworks, we really need to set the overarching philosophy for today's deep dive.
Yeah, the foundation.
Because we are looking at all of this entirely through a culture-first angle. I mean, this isn't just about handing you a clipboard and, telling your prep cooks to just check off boxes in the walk-in cooler.
Right, because a clipboard doesn't stop an outbreak. Fostering a culture-first mindset means that safety is viewed as the ultimate foundation of your guest hospitality.
Right. You can't have hospitality if you're making people sick.
Exactly. It has to be deeply, fundamentally embedded into the daily rhythm of the kitchen. If your team is only practicing food safety when the local health inspector walks through the door.
Or when a manager is staring right at them.
Yeah, exactly. If they only do it then, you have already lost the battle against a pathogen like this.
For sure.
True food safety culture is what your employees do when they're completely alone in the prep kitchen at 6 in the morning.
I love that. What you do in the dark, basically. So let's face the invisible enemy head on. The CDC alert specifically names Cyclospora chitinensis. And, for anyone who is used to just worrying about E. coli or salmonella, we are dealing with a totally different beast here.
Oh yeah, we are stepping completely out of the realm of bacteria entirely.
Wait, entirely?
Entirely. Cyclospora chitinensis is a microscopic, single-celled protozoan parasite.
A parasite, okay.
Right. And because it's a parasite, its biological life cycle, its resilience, and the way it actually interacts with its environment and its human host they're entirely unique. Well, bacteria can basically multiply on a piece of food left out at room temperature.
Mm-hmm.
But a parasite like this, it requires a host to complete its life cycle.
Yeah.
Yet it possesses these environmental survival mechanisms that just make it an absolute nightmare for the supply chain.
And the clinical nightmare that this parasite causes, I think the infection is known as cyclosporiasis, is just brutal.
It's awful.
Looking at the CDC data, the symptoms include explosive watery diarrhea, severe loss of appetite, significant weight loss, intense abdominal cramping, bloating, nausea, and this really profound, debilitating fatigue.
Yeah, the fatigue is something people really complain about.
And some people also experience vomiting, body aches, and like low-grade fevers.
Right, and the duration is what truly separates it from, a standard bout of food poisoning.
It's not just a 24-hour thing.
Not at all. Without specific antibiotic treatment, these symptoms don't just pass in a rough 24 hours. They can last anywhere from a few days to over a month.
A month.
Yeah, a month. And even worse, the infection is known for a relapsing cycle.
Oh, so it comes back.
Yeah, a patient might feel better for a day or two, they try to go back to their normal diet, and then bam, the symptoms return with full force. And that leads to severe dehydration and major complications, especially for anyone who is immunocompromised.
Which brings us to the terrifying reality of why this parasite, combined with fresh produce, is basically the absolute perfect storm. It's what we call the no-kill step reality.
Right.
Like we mentioned the raw chicken earlier, the FDA tells us that cooking produce to 158 degrees Fahrenheit will effectively kill Cyclospora. But, nobody orders their side salad cooked to 158 degrees.
No, nobody wants hot, mushy iceberg lettuce.
Exactly. Iceberg lettuce is served raw, meaning it goes from the soil to the harvest bin to the processing plant to your cutting board and then straight to the fork.
Yeah, and if the parasite is on that leaf, there is no thermal kill step to save you. You are relying entirely on preventative measures.
Which is terrifying.
It is. The entire architecture of our fresh produce supply chain is built on preventing the contamination in the first place because, once it's there, you simply cannot cook it away.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. If the contamination is that catastrophic, let's look at the actual mechanics of how this spreads inside a restaurant environment.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's say a food service worker is infected with this parasite. They use the restroom, they fail to wash their hands properly, and then they go back to the line and toss a Caesar salad. Are they immediately infecting the customer who eats that salad?
Well, the biology here is incredibly counterintuitive because the answer is actually no. They do not immediately infect the customer through that direct action.
Wait, really?
Really. And this is due to the parasite's bizarre life cycle, specifically something called the sporulation delay.
A sporulation delay.
Yeah. So when an infected human sheds the Cyclospora parasite in their stool, the parasite is in a state we call unsporulated. Think of it like a dormant seed. In this unsporulated state, it is biologically inactive and entirely incapable of infecting another human host.
Oh.
Right. In order to sporulate and become infectious, it requires very specific environmental conditions. It needs warm temperatures, high humidity, and a massive incubation period sitting out in the environment.
How massive?
We are talking about a 1 to 2 week delay outside the human body before it even becomes a threat.
Wow. So direct, immediate person-to-person transmission in a kitchen like, handing someone a contaminated plate or tossing a salad with unwashed hands is incredibly rare for this specific parasite.
And it's almost non-existent. But before anyone breathes a sigh of relief, that delay is exactly what creates the epidemiological nightmare we are seeing right now in this 9-state outbreak.
Because it's so hard to trace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the timeline is so stretched out, tracing the source of the outbreak becomes an exercise in chasing ghosts.
Right. Let's trace that timeline for the listener just to show how impossible this is to track from a public health perspective. Okay, so let's say a customer goes to a restaurant and eats a taco garnished with contaminated iceberg lettuce on July 1st. They feel completely fine.
Right.
The parasite is now inside them, but nothing happens immediately.
Because the CDC notes that symptoms usually begin about 1 week after infection, but, that incubation period can range anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks or more, depending on, the individual's immune system and the initial parasitic load they actually consumed.
Okay, so our customer finally gets sick on, let's say, July 10th. Like most people, they assume it's just a 24-hour stomach bug from something they ate yesterday.
Right. They blame the sketchy food truck on July 9th.
Exactly. They definitely aren't thinking about a taco they ate 9 days ago. So they try to wait it out at home with ginger ale and saltines. But by July 15th, they are severely dehydrated, in agonizing pain, and they finally go to urgent care.
And here's the next massive hurdle. Routine stool cultures at a hospital or a doctor's office, they do not automatically screen for Cyclospora.
They don't.
No. A standard GI panel is looking for the usual suspects, your Salmonella, Campylobacter, E. coli. The physician actually has to specifically request a specialized test for ova and parasites, or a specific PCR panel just to find the Cyclospora.
So by the time the doctor orders the right test, the lab processes it, and the local health department gets a confirmed positive result, we're looking at late July.
Late July, yeah.
And then an epidemiologist finally sits down to interview the patient and has to ask, can you list every single thing you ate between June 20th and July 1st?
I mean, nobody remembers what they had for lunch a month ago.
I don't even remember what I had on Tuesday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They might remember like a major anniversary dinner, but they will never remember the shredded lettuce on a quick Tuesday taco. And this is why foodborne illness outbreaks linked to parasites take so long to declare.
Ah, that makes perfect sense.
And why the contaminated product has usually been entirely consumed or just expired long before the recall is even issued.
Right. And because of that sporulation delay, the contamination almost always happens weeks earlier. It doesn't start in your kitchen, it starts in the dirt.
Yes.
We have to look at the journey from the farm to your back door. Ground zero for Cyclospora is the agricultural field.
And to really understand how it gets into the field, we rely on the FDA's commodity-specific guidelines for lettuce and leafy greens. These guidelines detail the 4 major agricultural risks that farms must meticulously manage.
Okay, so let's picture that head of iceberg lettuce growing in a massive, sprawling field in Mexico. The very first thing it interacts with, and the first major risk vector, is the water.
Right. Water is basically the ultimate conduit for agricultural pathogens. Farms have to evaluate every single irrigation method.
Like sprinklers versus drip.
Exactly. Are they using drip irrigation beneath the soil where the water doesn't touch the leaves, or overhead sprinklers that blast water directly onto the edible leafy parts?
That makes a huge difference.
It does. Water that directly contacts the edible portion of the leaf must be of appropriate microbial quality. If a farm uses, say, contaminated tailwater, which is agricultural runoff, or improperly treated reclaimed water, the risk of introducing a parasite to the entire crop just skyrockets.
Right.
And it's not just irrigation either. It's also the water used for hydrovac cooling immediately after harvest to bring the field heat down.
Right, because you have to cool the lettuce down immediately so it doesn't wilt. The FDA is also incredibly strict about flooding, right?
Oh, very strict. The guidelines state that if floodwaters, which are, reasonably likely to contain sewage or agricultural runoff or animal waste, if that water contacts the edible portions of the lettuce, that crop is legally considered adulterated.
And the legal definition of adulterated is vital here, right?
Extremely vital. The FDA explicitly states they are not aware of any method of reconditioning those flooded crops that would make them safe for human consumption.
Wow. So you can't just wash it really well.
Nope. You cannot wash floodwater off a head of lettuce. You cannot hit it with a chemical sanitizer, because the hydrostatic pressure of the floodwater actually forces contaminants deep into the plant tissues.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. The pressure pushes it inside.
Exactly. If a field floods, the crop must be entirely excluded from the human food supply and destroyed. No exceptions.
Okay, so the lettuce isn't just dealing with the water, though. It's growing in the dirt. Which brings us to the second FDA agricultural risk factor, soil amendments. And we are talking about fertilizers and compost here, right?
Right. Farmers use animal manure to add vital nutrients back into the soil, which is normal. But human pathogens and parasites can persist in untreated animal manures for weeks or even months.
Yikes.
Yeah. So the FDA guidelines require proper composting via thermal treatment.
Meaning you heat the compost.
Right. The compost pile has to reach and maintain a specific internal temperature, often over 131 degrees Fahrenheit for several days, to achieve what's called a thermal death curve that destroys those pathogens. Furthermore, farmers have to maximize the time interval between applying that soil amendment and actually harvesting the crop. You do not apply fresh compost the week before you cut the lettuce.
Right, give it time to break down. So our third risk factor in that field is environmental encroachment. Because a massive farm isn't some sealed laboratory, it's an open ecosystem.
Very open.
You have wildlife or domestic animals wandering into the production fields and, well, leaving feces behind.
Yeah. Farms have to actively monitor and minimize animal activity. They have to assess the proximity of their fields to wetlands, forests, or open range lands where, cattle might be grazing.
Right, because runoff from the cattle ranch could hit the lettuce field.
Exactly. If the harvest crew is walking through a field and they see evidence of wildlife pest activity, say a flock of birds has been roosting in a specific sector, or there are rabbit feces in the furrows, they have to be trained to flag that area and not harvest the affected portions of that field.
They just leave it.
Yeah, a strict buffer zone has to be established around the contamination.
And the fourth risk, which brings us directly back to Cyclospora and its unique human host requirement, is the human factor.
Yes, and this involves the highly sensitive logistical calculation of field latrine placement.
Right. Bathrooms for the workers.
Exactly. Harvest crews are working grueling hours in these massive, sprawling fields. If a farm worker is an asymptomatic carrier of a pathogen, and the sanitary facilities are too far away, or insufficiently stocked with soap, or improperly maintained,
Then they might just go in the field.
right, and the risk of human feces contaminating the soil, the harvest bins, or the cutting equipment is a reality we just have to acknowledge and aggressively manage through good agricultural practices, or GPs.
Okay, so all of these risks, the water, the soil, the animals, the workers, they all exist before the lettuce is even packed into a box.
Long before.
It really highlights the sheer scale of supply chain vulnerability. Like the World Health Organization estimates that unsafe food causes 600 million illnesses annually.
That number is just wild.
600 million. And supply chain breaks are consistently identified as the major failure point. I mean, our global food system moves incredibly fast. A farm in Mexico can harvest lettuce, pack it, and have it sitting on a loading dock in Chicago within 72 hours.
Which is incredible.
It's a modern marvel, honestly, but it also means a localized contamination event can become a multinational crisis in 3 days.
Which is exactly why we have to talk about supplier verification.
Yeah.
We are pulling directly from the protocols established by MLW, which operates as a trust infrastructure company.
Right. They help food businesses manage complex compliance landscapes.
Yeah, and they point out that international frameworks like the FDA's Food Safety Modernization Act or FSMA, the Codex Alimentarius, and EU regulations, they all legally require systematic, documented supplier vetting.
We should probably unpack those acronyms because they basically dictate how the modern food system works. FSMA was a massive shift in U.S. law, right?
Huge shift. FSMA fundamentally changed the FDA's approach from simply reacting to foodborne illnesses to actively preventing them.
Proactive versus reactive.
Exactly. Under the preventative controls rule, facilities actually must have a written food safety plan that includes a hazard analysis and risk-based preventative controls. And then you have the Codex Alimentarius, which translates to food code.
Right.
It's a collection of internationally recognized standards, codes of practice, and guidelines established by the UN and the WHO to protect consumer health and ensure fair practices in the food trade.
So gone are the days when a restaurant owner could just, call up a local vendor, get a verbal promise that their produce is clean, and just leave it at that.
Long gone. A verbal promise is no longer legally or morally sufficient to protect your guests.
And MAUW outlines the need for a comprehensive assessment through a rigorous 7-step verification plan. Let's walk through what that actually entails for an operator on the ground.
Yeah. Step 1 is conducting a hazard analysis for every single ingredient you purchase.
Every ingredient.
Every single one. Step 2 is mapping your suppliers to understand exactly where your food originates, not just who delivers it. Like, your distributor isn't the origin.
Right. The distributor is just the middleman.
Exactly. Step 3 requires you to define exact microbiological criteria. You have to tell your vendor what is acceptable and what is an immediate rejection.
Okay. Step 4.
Step 4 is document review, meaning you actually have to sit down and read their safety plans. Step 5 is demanding third-party audits. Step 6 is establishing strict receiving verification protocols on your own loading dock.
Which is crucial.
And Step 7 is continuous monitoring and performance review. You don't just vet them once in 2026 and assume they are totally fine in 2029.
Things change, farms change.
Exactly. This ties into the concept of risk-based vetting. You have to allocate your resources where the danger is highest.
I like to think of it this way. You wouldn't treat a delivery of a sealed, shelf-stable pallet of canned tomatoes with the same intense paranoia as a delivery of fresh, raw, pre-washed spinach.
No, of course not.
Because the tomatoes have undergone a massive commercial thermal process. They are sterile, the spinach is raw and ready to eat.
Right, so a one-size-fits-all approach to supplier verification is basically a waste of your operational resources. High-risk suppliers, specifically those providing raw, leafy greens that will not undergo a kill step in your kitchen, they require the absolute highest level of scrutiny.
So what should operators be asking for?
You should be demanding third-party GP Good Agricultural Practices certificates, or you should require GFSI-recognized certifications.
GFSI being the Global Food Safety Initiative.
Yes, GFSI benchmarks food safety standards globally. One of the most common certifications under their umbrella is the Safe Quality Food, or SQF, audit.
Okay.
If a farm has an SQF certification, it means an independent, highly trained auditor has physically walked their fields, they've tested their water, inspected their latrines, and verified their compost logs.
But I know exactly what an independent operator listening to this is thinking right now.
What's that?
How can a small, single-unit, family-run restaurant possibly afford to execute a massive corporate-level audit on a farm in central Mexico? They don't have a compliance department. They're just trying to get through the Friday dinner rush.
Well, it is a very real logistical challenge, I admit, but the process scales. MMOW notes that a small restaurant does not need to hire a multi-million-dollar auditing firm to fly across the world.
Okay, so what did they do?
You leverage the power of your distributor. You use simple documented checklists and standardized supplier questionnaires. You literally just ask your broadline distributor, hey, can you provide the GAP or SQF certification for the farm that grew this specific case of iceberg lettuce?
And if they say no?
If the distributor cannot provide it or refuses to provide it, you do not buy that product.
Wow.
The key here is documentation and having a defined standard rather than just, hoping for the best.
And that standard has to be ruthlessly enforced at the most critical physical bottleneck in your entire restaurant, the loading dock.
Yes, absolutely.
I really like to think of receiving inspection as a strict international border crossing. Like, do not let a busy 19-year-old prep cook make a judgment call on a questionable delivery just because they want to get back to chopping onions.
Right. You need strict, non-negotiable rules for receiving. For example, if your fresh produce is transported in a truck adjacent to raw poultry without an impermeable physical barrier between
You
them,
reject the delivery.
you reject it. If the delivery truck has a broken cooling unit and the lettuce arrives at 55 degrees, you reject it.
Because it's supposed to be under 41 degrees.
Exactly. And if a supplier repeatedly refuses to comply with your safety requests or, tries to sneak compromised product past your receivers,
You drop them immediately.
instantly.
You just cannot safely use a supplier who won't respect your standards. One contaminated delivery can compromise your entire operation and basically destroy a brand you spent decades building.
Right. So now let's assume the system worked. You verified the supplier. The lettuce has cleared the border crossing on your loading dock. It's safely stored in your walk-in cooler at 38 degrees, and it's time for morning prep.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and we need to shatter a massive industry misconception about prep and sanitation. We need to talk about the myth of the wash,
Yes.
because looking at the FDA guidelines, there's a shocking truth about washing fresh produce. Washing produce in cold, chlorinated water only reduces microbial populations by 90 to 99%.
And, to a layperson, eliminating 99% of a pathogen sounds like a massive victory.
It sounds like an A+.
Right. But in microbiology, leaving 1% of a pathogen behind is more than enough to cause a catastrophic outbreak. Washing fresh-cut lettuce is absolutely necessary to remove soil, sand, and free-floating microbes, but it is not a sterilization process. It is merely a reduction process.
Okay, but why doesn't the chlorine just eradicate everything on the leaf? If I put bleach on a stainless steel prep table, it kills everything. Why doesn't it work on iceberg lettuce?
It all comes down to the microscopic biology of the plant itself. A stainless steel table is smooth. A lettuce leaf is not.
Right.
Microorganisms, especially parasites like Cyclospora and bacteria like E. coli, have a strong biological affinity to adhere to the cut surfaces of the lettuce. They actually hide in the microscopic nooks, crannies, microfissures, and stomata.
Stomata being the natural pores of the plant tissue.
Exactly. Water and chemical disinfectants simply cannot penetrate those microscopic spaces deeply enough to eliminate the pathogen entirely. The pathogen literally hides inside the topography of the leaf.
Okay, so knowing that the wash is physically limited, operators have to perfectly understand the regulatory and practical difference between RAC and RTE.
Right.
So RAC stands for raw agricultural commodity.
Yes. This would be a whole unwashed head of romaine or iceberg lettuce straight from the field. It arrives in a cardboard box, and it's usually covered in field dirt.
So that must be washed.
It must be washed thoroughly in your commercial kitchen sink to remove the soil and external contaminants before it is cut or served.
But then RTE stands for ready to eat.
Right.
These are your fresh-cut, bagged salads that have already been commercially triple washed and processed at an industrial facility. And the FDA guidelines say these should not be rewashed by the end user in a restaurant.
No, never.
Wait, hold on. Let me push back on this. If I'm a chef and I see bagged lettuce, my first instinct is that washing it a fourth time is just adding a smart extra layer of safety. I want to be extra careful for my guests. Why wouldn't I want to run it through the sink one more time? Are you telling me that actually makes it worse?
I know, that instinct makes total sense from a hospitality perspective. But the answer is a firm no. And the science behind why is crucial for every operator to understand. Rewashing RTE produce in a commercial restaurant sink actually introduces a massive risk of cross-contamination.
Cross-contamination from where? The sink itself?
Yes, from the sink basin.
Yeah.
Which, might have been used to wash raw chicken earlier and wasn't sanitized perfectly.
Oh,
Or from the tap water, from the colander, or even from the preparer's hands. Furthermore, there is an invisible physical reaction that happens involving osmotic pressure.
osmotic pressure. Okay, explain that.
So if you take warm produce, say a bag of lettuce that sat on a prep table for 20 minutes, and you submerge it in a sink of cold tap water, the temperature differential causes the gases inside the plant tissue to contract.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this creates a vacuum effect, causing water infiltration. It literally sucks the cold water and any surface pathogens floating in it deep inside the plant tissues, where they are perfectly protected from any future sanitizers.
That is wild. You are actively pulling the bacteria inside the leaf.
Exactly. And finally, there's the chemistry of the wash water itself. The organic load of the lettuce, the microscopic dirt, the plant uses, the cellular debris released from the cut edges, all of that quickly inactivates the free available chlorine present in standard tap water. If you dump a massive bag of lettuce into a sink of water to recrisp it, as the guidelines mention some kitchens trying to do, the chlorine is neutralized almost instantly.
Yeah.
You aren't washing the lettuce, you are creating a dangerous ambient temperature bacterial soup.
A bacterial soup. That's a horrifying image.
Yeah. If one leaf in that bag had a pathogen, you have now cross-contaminated every single other leaf in that sink.
That is terrifying and totally counterintuitive, but it makes perfect sense when you explain the biology and the chemistry. The wash is basically an illusion of safety if it's done wrong.
It is. And this exact vulnerability is why the FDA has very niche but critical rules regarding temperature measurement during receiving and storage as well.
Right.
Produce is highly perishable, and the cold chain must be meticulously maintained. But if your receiver takes a sharp thermometer probe and physically punctures a bagged RTE salad to check the internal temperature, they have just breached the protective modified atmosphere packaging.
Which ruins the shelf life.
And worse, that metal probe just pushed any potential surface contaminants directly into the center of the product.
Oh, man. So how are you supposed to verify the temperature of a sealed bag without breaking the seal?
The FDA requires non-invasive pillowing techniques.
Pillowing?
Yeah. You take your thermometer probe and you fold the bag around it, or you place the probe firmly between two intact packages of lettuce, pressing them together to get an accurate reading of the ambient temperature between the products.
That makes sense.
Right. And if an employee does puncture a bag with a probe to get an internal temp, the rule is absolute.
Yeah.
You must discard that penetrated product. It can no longer be served.
Wow. Just throw it away. All of this ties back to the World Health Organization's basic rules to keep clean and separate.
Absolutely.
We have to constantly emphasize the difference between cleaning, which is basically just removing visible dirt and debris with soap and friction, and sanitizing, which is actively reducing the number of microscopic microorganisms using heat or chemicals.
Those are two very different steps.
And you absolutely must keep raw meats entirely separated from raw produce. Like separate color-coded cutting boards, separate knives, separate storage areas in the walk-in.
Because if a knife used to trim raw chicken touches a head of iceberg lettuce, you have completely bypassed every single supply chain safeguard, GAP audit, and third-party verification we just spent the last 20 minutes discussing.
It's all negated in 1 second. Which brings us to the most unpredictable, dangerous variable in the entire culinary ecosystem. The human vector.
Yeah, humans.
Because all the structural rules, the massive international agricultural frameworks, the temperature pillowing, all of these technological and systemic defenses are completely negated if the human being holding the chef's knife is a vector for disease.
And this brings us to the exclusion rule.
Right.
Which is heavily detailed in both the local DC health guidelines and the overarching FDA model food code.
And the FDA model food code is the scientific foundation that local jurisdictions use to write their own health laws, right?
Exactly. And when it comes to sick employees, especially those exhibiting symptoms of diarrheal illness, the code dictates a strict zero-tolerance policy.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's connect this back to the biology we discussed in the very beginning. If Cyclospora requires a 1 to 2 week environmental sporulation delay to actually become infectious, why do we have to instantly exclude a worker who is actively shedding it today?
That's a fair question.
Right, because if the parasite coming out of them is unsporulated and biologically inactive, they aren't immediately contagious to the customer. Why can't they just wash their hands really well and keep working the salad station?
What's fascinating here is that the danger isn't just direct transmission to the taco on the plate.
Okay.
An employee shedding the parasite is actively turning the entire kitchen environment into a biological reservoir. Every time they touch the walk-in cooler handle, the touchscreen on the point-of-sale system, their apron, the prep table, or the cutting boards, they are depositing unsporulated parasites.
Consider where they go.
Yes. Those parasites can survive on those surfaces, eventually sporulate, and contaminate the physical space long after the employee's shift is over.
Oh, wow. And it's not just about the one specific parasite we're tracking today, is it?
No, it's about the broader epidemiological risk. Regulatory agencies like DC Health operate on the assumption of a worst-case concurrent scenario.
Meaning they could have more than one bug.
Exactly. If an employee is suffering from diarrhea, they might have Cyclospora, but they might also be concurrently shedding immediately infectious, highly contagious pathogens.
Like norovirus.
Exactly. The fecal-oral route is merciless. They could be shedding norovirus, E. coli, O157, and H7, or hepatitis A alongside the parasite. You cannot wait for a 2-week lab culture to confirm exactly what is causing their symptoms.
You just have to act.
You have to act. The FDA Model Food Code uses 2 very specific terms here: restriction and exclusion.
What's the difference?
Well, restriction means the employee can still work in the building, but they cannot handle exposed food or clean equipment. Maybe they sweep the parking lot or do paperwork. But with these symptoms, diarrhea, vomiting, it's an exclusion. You cannot take half measures. You cannot simply reassign a sick worker from the salad station to the dish pit or tell them to go count inventory in the back office.
So they have to leave.
An excluded employee must be physically barred from the premises entirely. They cannot be in the building, and according to the guidelines, they can only be legally reinstated after they provide official, written medical documentation from a healthcare provider clearing them of the infection.
Wow, that's strict. But, writing a rule in an employee handbook that says stay home if you're sick is incredibly easy. Any corporate lawyer can draft that up.
Oh, totally.
But actually getting your kitchen staff to follow it is impossibly hard if your restaurant culture is toxic. And this is where the culture-first execution becomes the most critical part of this entire deep dive.
It really is the anchor of everything. We have to look at the socioeconomic reality of the hospitality industry. If an employee lives paycheck to paycheck, and calling out sick means they literally can't pay their rent that month, they're going to show up to work.
Of course they are.
If they fear they will be fired or written up or lose all their prime future shifts for leaving the team shorthanded on a busy Friday night, they will hide their symptoms. They will take some over-the-counter stomach medicine, sweat through their shift, and quietly contaminate your kitchen.
Which is horrifying, but it's human nature.
Right. So a culture-first philosophy means creating a physical and psychological environment where an employee feels completely safe to report their illness. It means leadership accountability.
Right. Do your managers come to work sick because they want to look tough?
Exactly. If they do, the staff will just mimic that behavior. Does your operation offer any form of paid sick leave? Safety has to be framed as team empowerment.
So when a prep cook calls out sick, the manager's response over the phone cannot be, a heavy sigh, a guilt trip about how busy they are, and a demand to find their own coverage.
No, it must be, thank you for protecting our guests and our team today. Focus on getting better. We have your back.
That's a huge shift in tone.
It is. This is about protecting the wider community, not just a fear of getting caught by a health inspector and losing points on an audit. If your operational culture doesn't financially and psychologically support the human beings doing the actual work, your million-dollar food safety protocols are just fiction on a piece of paper.
Fiction on a piece of paper. That's a great way to put it. But even with a perfect culture, perfect receiving, and perfect prep, sometimes the system still fails further up the supply chain.
It happens.
And a massive recall hits. That brings us to our final operational reality. We have to look at the worst-case scenario, handling recalls and outbreaks in real time.
And the National Restaurant Association provides excellent, structured guidance here. The core philosophy is proactive awareness. You should never, ever be waiting to hear about a lettuce recall on the local evening news.
No, by the time it hits the news, the contaminated product has already been served.
Long gone.
Operators need to sign up for direct, automated digital alerts from the FDA, the USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service, and advocacy organizations like Stop Foodborne Illness.
Furthermore, if you operate a multi-unit restaurant group, you must have an instantaneous internal communications infrastructure. If a recall alert is received by the general manager at Unit A, it must be instantly and uniformly conveyed to the managers at Units B, C, and D. You cannot rely on a casual group text message that someone might miss.
No, absolutely not. So let me pose a real-world scenario that happens in kitchens every single day.
All right, lay on me.
A manager gets the July 24th CDC alert about Taylor Farms iceberg lettuce. They run into the walk-in cooler to check their inventory. They see a massive clear plastic bin full of shredded iceberg lettuce that looks exactly like the recalled product.
Okay.
But the outer cardboard box, the one with the specific lot code, the harvest date, and the farm origin printed on it, was broken down and thrown in the recycling dumpster yesterday.
Classic.
The lettuce is just sitting in a generic Lexan container. They have absolutely no way to verify if this specific batch is part of the recall. What do?
This is the moment of truth for a manager. And this is where you execute the absolute foundational golden rule of food safety. When in doubt, throw it out.
You don't try to smell it.
No.
You don't call the distributor and try to guess based on the delivery date. You throw it out, period.
Period. You cannot risk exposing a guest to a potentially lethal parasite to save $40 on your weekly food cost. If you cannot definitively prove through traceability documentation that the product is safe and outside the specific recall parameters, you must legally and morally treat it as adulterated.
Because traceability is only as good as the label on the box.
Exactly. Once you lose the label, you lose the safety guarantee.
Okay, so the National Restaurant Association outlines exactly how to handle that compromised product once you make the decision to pull it. You don't just toss it in the open dumpster out back where a wild animal or a person experiencing homelessness might get to it.
Oh, definitely not. You isolate it completely. You clearly label it with bold markers as do not use recalled, and then you must physically or chemically destroy the product to protect the wider community.
How do you chemically destroy lettuce?
Often, this means taking the recalled lettuce and pouring a chemical sanitizer like bleach or floor cleaner directly over it before throwing it in the trash.
Oh, wow. So you ruin it.
You denature the food so that it is entirely impossible for anyone or anything to consume it. And of course, you document the destruction. Take photographs of the product and the lot codes, log the weights, and keep the invoices, so your corporate office can process a vendor reimbursement claim later.
But the final piece of handling an outbreak is perhaps the most delicate, and it's where many brands fail: transparent customer relations.
The instinct for many businesses in a crisis is to hide, to quietly throw away the lettuce, erase it from the menu for a week, and just pretend nothing happened, hoping nobody asks any questions.
But the NRA advises the exact opposite approach, right? Aggressive public transparency across all your communication channels.
Exactly. If you are pulling items off your menu because of a national recall, tell your guests exactly why. Frame it as a victory of your internal safety protocols. Say, we caught it so you didn't have to.
Right. If a guest asks a server why the wedge salad is suddenly unavailable tonight, you don't tell the server to lie and say you just ran out.
Never. You empower the server to say, there's a national CDC recall on iceberg lettuce. Our safety vetting systems flagged it immediately, we pulled it from our supply chain to protect you, and we will not serve it again until we can 100% guarantee its safety.
That level of honesty doesn't induce panic. In fact, it does the exact opposite. It builds immense, unbreakable brand trust with the listener, your guests, and the end user.
It proves that your culture-first safety promises aren't just marketing slogans. They're actual operational realities that you execute even when it costs you money.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today on how to build an invisible, multi-layered shield around your kitchen ecosystem. Let's dynamically summarize the top takeaways for you, the listener, to take back to your operation and implement right now.
Okay, number 1, vet your suppliers mercilessly. Establish risk-based vetting using the MLW 7-step protocols. Demand GAP or SQF certifications for high-risk raw produce, and treat your loading dock receiving like a strict international border crossing. If it's not transported safely or it's lacking documentation, reject it at the door.
Perfect. Number 2, understand the biological limits of the wash. Chlorine only reduces mudrobes by 90 to 99% because pathogens hide inside the microscopic stomata of the leaf. Know the critical difference between raw agricultural commodities and ready-to-eat produce, and never ever rewash commercially prepared bagged salads in your commercial sinks because you are just creating a dangerous cross-contamination soup.
And number 3, enforce zero-tolerance exclusion protocols for sick staff. Keep the biological reservoir out of your kitchen. But you can only achieve this by fostering a supportive, culture-first reporting environment where your team feels financially and psychologically empowered to protect the community without fear of losing their livelihoods.
Awesome summary. This deep dive into protecting your business and your guests was made possible by the incredible resources and support of our partners, and we have some mandatory sponsor tell-outs to share before we wrap up. First, a massive thank you to HRB Universal.
Yes, we extend our deepest gratitude to HRB Universal for delivering high-caliber educational resources, robust compliance tools, and professional development programs that truly drive operational excellence across the entire hospitality industry.
You can access their comprehensive food safety certifications, hazard control plans, and management consulting services directly at hrbuni.com, or just search HRB Universal online. We also proudly recognize the Plate and Pour Collective Equity Partner Program.
This visionary initiative is at the forefront of sustainable business development. They are actively fostering equitable growth, shared prosperity, and financial mentorship by removing systemic barriers for emerging entrepreneurs in the food and beverage sector. You can explore their capital initiatives and resources via the main HRB Universal portal.
And before we let you go, a mandatory call to action. Please subscribe, listen, and watch the Mise en Place Culture First show. You can stream our audio deep dives directly via miseenplaceculturefirst.com, hrbuni.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Or, if you prefer a visual experience, you can watch full-length video episodes on the HRB TV network, which is available on Roku or Amazon Fire TV.
To close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Throughout this entire conversation, we've discussed how we rely on this massive, invisible architecture of agricultural science, thermal composting, and multi-step supply chain verification to keep us safe. But the reality is, our global climate is rapidly changing.
Yeah.
As average global temperatures rise and weather patterns shift, bringing floods to new areas, the warm, humid conditions that parasites like Cyclospora need to sporulate and survive, they're going to expand into entirely new agricultural regions that have never had to deal with them before.
Wow, that's a scary thought.
It raises a daunting question for all of us in the industry. Are our current cold chain infrastructures and our 7-step verification models agile enough to adapt when the map of what we consider high-risk areas fundamentally changes overnight?
It's a heavy question, and it means our work is never truly done. But with the playbook we built today, it's a challenge we are absolutely equipped to meet. Until next time, keep your stations organized, protect your team, and stay crisp and clean.